Hey everybody, it's your friendly neighborhood Jerry Rasco here with you today for another amazing Spider-Man art retrospective video. Today we are going to be looking at the Amazing Spider-Man number 31, a very interesting issue that is a real kind of transition point in terms of the ongoing storyline. We see some changes in Peter Parker and his personal life, and then we also see the start of a new multi-issue storyline from Spidey's perspective. So there's a lot of things going on in this issue story-wise that are very important. Of course, as always, we're going to deep dive into the art itself and talk about the making of this comic. So yeah, of course, thank you all for subscribing and for supporting the channel here. If this is your first video, then please take a look at the playlist that we have here, which does go all the way back to Amazing Fantasy number 15, the first appearance of Spider-Man. And so we have been doing reviews of each issue going all the way back to the beginning to where we are today again with issue number 31. So please think about checking those out. Think about subscribing to the channel and, of course, clicking the notification button. These videos do come out every Monday at 8 a.m. Central Time, and you don't want to miss one. So, again, this issue is a very interesting one. Like I said, a transition in terms of the story. And so, without further ado, let's get into the comic. So here we have the cover to Amazing Spider-Man 31, and this is a pretty interesting cover. The bright red background is great. It really does help pop and make this something that would be very eye-catching, which of course is the key to a cover, right? You want this to be eye-catching to lure people in to pick up this issue compared to anything else that's on the newsstand at the time. It's an interesting use of the graphical design of the Spider-Man logo. So there are multiple Spider-Man logos. So sometimes just the Spidey's head that we see there in the center of the image is used as a Spidey logo. But then you also have the image or the design on his chest, which is different than this one. It usually includes the head and torso of the spider and the legs kind of going 4 up, 4 down. This is based off the design on the back. So Spidey has this kind of an element on his back, a oval or circle with the 8 legs coming off of it. And that's where we get this design. Nice use of the space again as well for the montage. So we've got some imagery here of what's going on in the issue, including some costume bad guys, Spidey looks like escaping some sticky situations and some underwater stuff. And I specifically like the little fishies swimming around with the characters here. I thought that was cute. So a good cover, one that again is eye-catching, gives us that there's action in this story for sure, and something that would lead you to pick it up. So as we get into the actual issue itself, let me explain as well as I always do here. This is a scanned PDF copy of the comic. So Marvel in 2004 found actual copies of each issue and went down and sat down and scanned those pages directly. So this is not a reprint. This is not a recoloring from the black and white files, anything of that nature. This is just basically, for lack of a better word, photographs of what the actual comic looked like. So it includes ads from the 60s. You'll see, the way the coloring was done. It was based on the printing technology at the time. You'll see the wear and tear, the fact that it's on newsprint paper that's aged. All of that stuff comes into play, and that all explains what we are looking at here. We start off with a big splash page. I've talked about this before and how, for the most part, I've gone on record as saying I don't like the splash page to start with unless it's the first page of the story. This is an image from the story, but then we're going to kind of go backwards, start at the beginning, and eventually get to this point. So my point was, why wouldn't I just start with the story here on page 1 and then potentially use this as a splash page for this kind of action when it comes up in the story? Why preview it? Well, one of the things that I've sort of postulated, which I don't know is a fact or not. It's just my guess. Um, so it has to do with how comics were handled from a retailer perspective at this time. So at this time, what would happen is you had comics were sold at newsstands, at pharmacies, grocery stores, anywhere you sold newspapers and magazines, you would see comic books right next to them. And what would happen is the people who ran that retailing location would pay to order the comics. So they might get 10 copies of this comic or 5 copies of this comic and all the other ones, whatever it was. And any that didn't sell at the end of the month, when they went to put in their order for the next round of books, they would cut the cover off and send the cover back to the publisher. And when you did that, that told them that was proof that it did not sell. And the publisher would then give a credit towards the next order for each issue that didn't get sold. So really the risk was on the publisher to create books that were guaranteed to sell. Whereas today it's the direct market. So today comic book publishers sell to a distribution organization like Diamond Comics or Penguin Publishing or Penguin House, I think it is, publishing. And then they sell directly to comic book stores as opposed to, again, a pharmacy, a liquor store, a newsstand, whatever. So now what happens, they sell it, and the comic book retailers at the shops that we all go to, they buy those books outright. They buy them at a discounted price, and then they sell them at the full retail price to us, but they purchase them. So if they don't sell them, they can't send those issues back to the publisher for a credit. They have to put them in their back issue bin and hopefully eventually get their money by selling it to somebody. So the risk then becomes that it's not on the publisher, the risk is on the retailer. So here's, again, circle back around. Why would you have a splash page like this, which is as good as a cover? This could be a cover. This is a great image here, terrific action going on, and definitely tells the story of what's happening in the issue. Why wouldn't this be a cover? Or why would you put this behind the cover? Well, because eventually there's a chance that this cover might get torn off. It might get cut off and sent back. So you'd have a bunch of coverless books, and this is, in essence, a second cover on the inside so that people could still read the comic and know what they're getting into. It's still Spider-Man and what issue it is. So, again, just my speculation on that. I could be wrong. It might just be a storytelling practice of the time, but it's not my favorite. I'd rather save this for when it's needed in the story. Again, my opinion. Last thing here on the cover that I want to, actually 2 things on the cover I want to talk about. One is here the credits. We see script by Stan Lee, artwork by Steve Ditko, lettering by Sam Rosen. The past several issues we have had plot is a credit given also to Steve Ditko. And we've talked about this on the channel before, but plot is the basic through line of the story. It's the summary, if you will, of what the story is going to be. So you have key elements of what's going to happen, beginning, middle, and ending. And then Steve Ditko, as the artist, would draw the issue based on that plot. Sometimes the plot was, negotiated or talked through together with him and Stan. As we've gotten further along into the history of Spidey, those 2 creators were talking less and less, which led to a big final kind of outing between the 2 of them. So I don't know. It's possible that Steve didn't plot this issue, or that he created the one big plot that was going to be covered over multiple issues, and so he didn't get credit specifically per issue, or it's just an oversight in the credits. I don't know, right? But just something interesting to note that we don't see that plotting or plot credit here for Steve. But we'll see. I believe he plotted, created the plot for this issue because there are threads from the previous issue which are in here. And that starts with these bad guys here in these purple suits. So as it was pointed out to me by a friend of the channel, a comic expert, and Steve Ditko aficionado, Nick Caputo. Nick commented on my last video that featured, in the last episode, that featured these costume villains. And in the previous issue, if you haven't watched it, these guys were working for the villain in that issue called the Cat, or the Cat Burglar. And they were sort of also committing crimes at the same time the Cat Burglar was, almost as a distraction, so that the police and other people weren't looking at the Cat Burglar. That's how it was portrayed in the last issue. However, here, these same characters with the same design, now they are actually not working for the Cat Burglar. They are working for someone called the Master Planner, which is a new undisclosed villain that is part of this story. So what our friend Nick had said here is that, Purple Goons worked for the Master Planner, and that Ditko said he had the story and the rough dialogue accompanying it pointing that out. But it's possible that either Stan forgot that that's what was going on, that we had two storylines kind of happening at the same time, or just misunderstood and associated these guys with the Cat Burglar. So here we see them as part of this new plot, which again makes me think that if Steve Ditko plotted the previous issue that featured these villains, he plotted this one as well. So here we get into the story. They are stealing some, specifically, atomic devices. So it's a plant that builds some form of atomic device. They don't get into specifically what it is, because at this point it's not important. But the Master Planner, they mention him here. They have a message from the Master Planner, and the Master Planner has a specific plan called Plan G on how to defeat Spider-Man. So somebody has, crafted this entire scheme very, very well, knows Spider-Man's strengths, and, has an idea of how to defeat him. The bad guys use gas as opposed to bullets and things like that. And then they drop the equipment overboard, dive down to get it. But that's okay, because looks like their base is an underwater base. So the Master Planner's base is underwater. They would have had to deliver it there anyway. So this just helps them to avoid Spider-Man. So one of the things I noted here, we have grid pacing. I've talked about this lots and lots. When you have these, here we have 4-panel grid. In this case, we have 6 with 2 slightly larger over the top, but again, kind of a grid format. That really reflects fast pacing. We're talking about moving from image to image to image to image, boom, boom, boom. These things are all happening within seconds. We're not necessarily changing scenes, even though we go from up here in the helicopter to underwater. That's okay, because we're following the device that they drop and how it sinks underwater. So again, all of this is happening in the space of heartbeats, moments, and the pacing makes perfect sense with this sort of grid layout or composition of the page. So we have Spidey. He's doing his best to hold his breath, but he can only go so far. So he finally uses his webbing and the door that he broke in from the helicopter to damage the rotors and crash it into the river. This is a great image here. I like this one of Spidey a lot, where he's holding his hand over his head because he's starting to succumb to the sleep gas. But I thought that was very nice body posture. Again, the nice thing about Spider-Man is you don't have to see his face to recognize him. So obviously covering up his face is no big deal. And then here we go. They crash into the river. The guys in these suits, they just slap on their scuba gear because their suits are sort of made for that, and then take off. And Spidey is going to try to save them because he thinks they may drown, but there's nobody there. So interestingly enough, he's kind of confused by the whole situation, doesn't know what happened, but something's going on. And then we have a little bit of stuff under here from the Master Planner talking about how they have to be more careful of Spider-Man. Aunt May, over the last several issues, has still been feeling ill and dizzy. Peter is getting ready for his first day of college. He's got to go get his classes, get his books, all that stuff, which is what they do here with a great montage. I think this is a terrific way to summarize the feeling of that first day of registration for college, where you're going through and dealing with administration and lines and all the books and how much money and getting your schedule and where are the buildings, and how he's like, how he has never filled out so many cards and forms his whole life. All that kind of stuff really, I thought, was a nice it's a nice summary of what it is like to start college. So I thought that was very cool. Finally, Aunt May's illness can't be hidden any longer, and she faints or collapses in front of Peter, and they call the doctor, and she has to go to the hospital. I'm not talking too much about the art here, only because there's nothing out of the ordinary to speak of. That's pretty standard stuff. It's good. There's nothing that really pops out to me that makes me go, oh wow, this is an important, element to note or technique to note. I will say this, it's interesting. So she, Aunt May is in bed. She is weak. They've called the doctor, and you note these, again, sort of heavy cross shadows in here, trying to do essentially a sort of a film noir. The light is setting. She's ill. It's very grave. It's very serious. And so we add these sort of shadows. We'll see that again later in the issue. And here you go, right here, a couple times. So she's at the hospital. Peter goes to go home, and now he's just sitting in the dark. And so, again, we have that sort of noir look of a man sitting alone, pondering his problems, watching either the darkness, the light fade, or the darkness fade as the sun comes up. But it just has that dramatic lighting element that adds drama to the story. And so there we go. Now, here's something, again, it's not necessarily artistic things to point out, but key element to this issue. Here we have the first appearance of Gwen Stacy and Harry Osborn. Two people, if you know Spider-Man history, will be incredibly important in our hero's story going forward for a long time. And I gotta say, so Gwen Stacy here, she is mentioned as the beauty queen of Standard High, which apparently is a different high school than when Peter and Flash went to, but everybody kind of has heard of other people and things like that. Steve draws Gwen Stacy absolutely beautiful. I mean, this is incredible. When you compare her to other female characters we've seen in the issues, like Betty Brant, who Peter has been in love with, or Liz Allen, who's had a big crush on Peter, Gwen Stacy is absolutely drawn more beautiful than anybody we've seen. I mean, incredible. The great face, great, awesome drawing there. So super important in saying that this is the first time we've heard of them and how important they will become throughout the history of our hero. Also really interesting that just in general, again, we still have this grid pattern. This is a lot of stuff going through, just sort of resetting the new Peter life, right? So we had seen what it was like in high school. We knew some of the characters from high school, like Flash Thompson and stuff like that, and Liz Allen and others, some of the teachers and the space, and now we have to reestablish that. So we're doing a lot of that throughout these pages here. One of the things I thought is Harry Osborn is drawn, not just the dialogue. His dialogue is that he is just an absolute jerk. Peter is distracted by what's going on with Aunt May, but everybody thinks he's just rude or off, or he's whatever, except for Gwen. Gwen is the only one who's kind of like, maybe he's maybe he's got something going on. Maybe he's a nice guy deep down. I don't know. But look at how Harry is drawn. The way he has this long gap between his nose and his top lip. His eyes, his eyebrows are always kind of really cranked down, really pointed down, very devilish in a way. He's not drawn particularly attractive. And again, just sort of drawn mean looking, which I found very interesting. And that's how he's portrayed here in this first issue. Things will change, but for now, it's almost like maybe Harry Osborn might become the next Flash Thompson, right? As Flash kind of softens on Peter a little bit. Again, from an artistic standpoint, not a lot going on here. You're pretty standard, what we refer to in the business as talking heads. You have a lot of talking heads, people with a lot of dialogue to get through to move the story forward. How do you do it, right? And the camera moves around well. We've got some close-ups. Like back here, we've got a nice close-up of Gwen. We've got close-up of the people kind of huddled up talking about Peter, whispering about him. We cut from Peter back and forth, moving from a wide shot to more of a medium to, again, a close-up. So a lot of stuff going on here. Peter goes and he's looking for some crime, specifically so that he could take some photos, make some money. I did like on this page, I thought there were a few really good drawings. One, I like this one a lot, where Spidey is hanging on the edge of, I'm assuming this is like a water tower, and he's using his webbing to sort of offset his weight as he's leaning off to the side like this. And you really feel that weight. It feels like, because of the body posture and stuff and how straight that line is, like if you snap that line, he's going to fall. It really gives you that sense that you can feel that weight in that, with just a two-dimensional drawing. And then this one here, where he's sort of hanging from a web and he's using this hand, and it's very subtle, but this leg, so the line comes down, hooks around the back of this heel and then forward to his hand, and that's what he's balancing on while he's crouched down. That's a really, really good pose and a really good image. And then I do like this. We saw this before one time, where he's kind of peeling off that mask, which is skin tight, right? So peeling it off his head, you expect to hear the whack as it pops off as he pulls off that mask. So I think that's really cool. I like that a lot. I thought that was a really good image there as well. Kind of not traditional as far as what makes for a good superhero drawing, but you feel the tension on that cloth. You feel like it's being pulled and tugged up over his skin, and that's actually really hard to do. Again, more talking heads with the story. We've got Frederick Foswell, a reporter for the Daily Bugle. He's got to find out what's going on and get a story for Jonah about this stolen atomic equipment. Betty is still kind of trying to figure out if is she going to say yes to Ned's proposal. She wants to talk to Peter first, but Peter's just assumed she's going to marry Ned, which is kind of the indication she gave, and so he's been avoiding Betty. So there we go. So we have Betty. We have Frederick Foswell has a persona that he puts on as Patch, as this guy who wears a rubber mask with an eye patch so he can get info about criminals. Gwen Stacy continues to try to sort of break down Peter's persona at the time, where he's very, very focused on Aunt May and what's going on, with her. And she is determined that she is going to be noticed. So there we go. So now Patch, aka Frederick Foswell, has gotten a little bit of a tip, and he lets Spidey know. I thought this was really cool too. This is nice lighting, where if he's hanging upside down and he's being lit from above, then his chin would sort of block the light on the top of his head, and so having his head in shadow in this alley, I thought was very, very neat. That's a nice lighting effect that we don't always see used when it comes to Spidey, right? So here we go. The bad guys in the purple costumes going to rob a boat, steal some equipment. Spidey attacks. They use their gas on him, but as he notes, he's prepared this time. We don't know how, but we'll see. This is a good image here of Spidey swinging down, in terms of just being the perspective of his feet being much closer to us versus these guys down here. Pretty standard kind of fight. They're trying to use all this netting and cranes and stuff to try to catch Spidey, and they can't quite do it. He's leaping all over, using his webs, and then they do finally get him in the cargo net, which he promptly rips right out of. The bad guys dive away and swim off while they can. And here we see the description of how Spidey was ready. So he knew they used gas, so he had this chemical filter that he put under his mask, and it filtered out the gas. So I like that. I think that's really neat. That's the kind of thing that you can do with Spidey, because of the way the shape. Like, I'm trying to see if there's a good example. I don't think there's any real close-ups of Spider-Man in his mask, but I mean, you see the way that it's drawn, there's a little bit of where his nose protrudes, and then it goes straight down the cloth kind of over his mouth. And so, yeah, he could have sort of this filter underneath, and it really wouldn't necessarily change the overall face shape underneath the mask. So I think that's pretty good there. And then, of course, we have more of the master planner talking about how he's going to be successful. And then, of course, Aunt May's doctors, she doesn't have a lot of time left. So so here we go on the last page. What's going to happen? The cliffhanger. What's going to happen to Aunt May? Who is the master planner? What is he trying to accomplish by stealing this stuff? He clearly seems to have Spidey in his sights. So what will happen? And there's the end of the issue. So let's cut back to the desk. We'll wrap things up, and we'll talk about next week. Okay, so here we are back at the desk, and that was Amazing Spider-Man number 31. So, like I said, it's a big transition of Peter going to college. We have more and new supporting characters in Harry Osborn, Gwen Stacy. We're going to see a lot of them coming up. We've got a brand new villain that seems to be putting together some very big plans, and we'll have to see who that is, and that's going to take us through a couple of issues, I believe. So this is a nice turning point. The last issue, I kind of as I kind of wrapped it up or summarized my feelings about it, I felt like the last issue was kind of a throwaway issue. What I meant was, if you skipped it, it was good, but you could have picked up right here and you wouldn't have missed anything. You could have jumped right into this story and you were fine. So this issue definitely has key elements that you have to note. If you miss out on this, you're going to be missing out on the whole, like I said, all the threads that were laid down for about the master planner. Who is it? What are his forces trying to do? What does he have to do with this atomic equipment? As well as what's going to be happening with Aunt May. So definitely this is a more important issue. In terms of just my rating out of 10, I would give it a 6 out of 10. Just in terms of the art, the plot, what's going on. Not a ton of action. It does have some action, but everything's very small, kind of quick. There wasn't anything from a artistic standpoint that what wowed me and made me go, man, that's an incredible drawing. That's an amazing shot of Spidey. That's something we've never seen before. So it didn't have a lot of that. However, I'm going to give it an extra 1.5. So I'm going to raise it to a 7.5 out of 10 because of the first appearances that are so critical. Gwen Stacy and Harry Osborn will literally play some of the most important parts in Peter Parker and Spider-Man's lives for decades to come. So having them in this issue makes it an absolutely key. If you're a collector, this was a key issue. So there we go. There's Amazing Spider-Man number 31. I thank you all for taking the time to come on this journey with me as we look at the Amazing Spider-Man and all of these issues. starting at the very beginning. As always, as I said, if you have the opportunity, please subscribe to the channel. Share the video if you liked it. If you know fans of Spider-Man, if you have fans of art, if you have fans of comics in your life, share this video. Help us get it out there, get it into the algorithm so more people will see it. And we will be talking to you next week as we look at Amazing Spider-Man number 32. Thanks again, and we'll see you next week.